The thing about political theater is that sometimes the performance becomes so real that the actors forget they're being watched. And when that happens, when the mask slips in front of millions, the fall isn't just dramatic, it's career-ending. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez walked into the News Nation America Speaks town hall on that crisp September evening, with the kind of confidence that only comes from living inside a carefully constructed bubble. 3 years of sympathetic interviews. 3 years of softball questions from friendly journalists. 3 years of adoring crowds who treated every word like revelation. She'd become accustomed to a certain kind of conversation, the kind where the most difficult question was how she managed to be so inspiring. She had no idea she was walking into an execution. Kash Patel was already there when she arrived, sitting in the green room, reading through a manila folder that seemed almost comically thick. He looked up when she passed by, caught her eye through the doorway, and smiled. Not the political smile, not the television smile. The smile of someone who knows something you don't. The smile of a federal prosecutor who spent the last 3 weeks building an airtight case and is about to watch the defendant realize they've already lost. AOC's team should have seen the warning signs, should have noticed that Patel had requested a podium with space for documents, should have questioned why he'd arrived 3 hours early to review technical specifications with the production team, should have wondered why he'd insisted on a live audience with no screening process, no planted supporters, just random people who'd registered online. But they'd been too busy coordinating her outfit, too focused on her talking points, too confident that their social media star could handle a former prosecutor who'd spent 15 years in federal law enforcement, who'd served in the National Security Council, who'd been trained to dissect lies for a living. The stage was set simply. 2 chairs angled toward each other at 45 degrees, a moderator's desk slightly behind and between them, a live studio audience of 200 people arranged in a semicircle, close enough to see facial expressions, close enough to hear every word without amplification. News Nation had promoted it as the Great Debate, Two Visions for America. The network was known for trying to stake out middle ground, for attempting to be fair to both sides, which meant both sides usually hated them equally. The audience filed in starting at 6:30. You could tell a lot about people by watching them choose their seats. The progressives, younger, wearing political merchandise, clustered on the left side of the semicircle. The conservatives, older, more button-down attire, took the right side. The genuinely undecided, the people who might actually learn something tonight, scattered throughout the middle, looking slightly uncomfortable, like they weren't sure they wanted to be there but couldn't help their curiosity. By 7 o'clock, every seat was filled. The energy in the room was electric, that crackling anticipation that comes before something people sense will be memorable. Producers moved through the aisles doing final sound checks. Cameras positioned themselves at multiple angles. The production assistant counted down from 5. At 7:03, Sarah Chen walked onto the stage. She was News Nation's chief political correspondent, a woman who'd built her career on asking questions that made everyone uncomfortable regardless of party. She had that distinctive ability to annoy progressives and conservatives in equal measure, which she considered a professional badge of honor. She sat at the moderator's desk, arranged her notes, looked directly into camera one. Good evening. I'm Sarah Chen, and welcome to America Speaks, where we bring together different perspectives for genuine conversation about the future of our country. Tonight, we have two guests who represent fundamentally different visions for America. The lights came up on the left side of the stage. Please welcome Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, representing New York's 14th Congressional District. AOC walked out to applause, that practiced walk she'd perfected over 3 years of public appearances. Not too fast, which would seem rushed. Not too slow, which would seem entitled. Just right. She smiled, waved to the audience, took her seat, adjusted her microphone with the ease of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. She was wearing what her stylist had described as accessible but elevated. A navy blazer from a designer brand that cost $1,800 but looked simple enough on camera. A white shirt underneath with a collar that suggested professionalism. Jeans, because she always wore jeans, part of her brand as someone who refused to conform to Washington's dress code. The jeans were also designer, $400, but that detail wouldn't be visible on camera. And please welcome Kash Patel, former federal prosecutor, former deputy assistant to the president, former chief of staff to the acting secretary of defense. Patel walked out to louder applause, which seemed to surprise the production team. You could see them glancing at each other, confused about why the audience response was stronger for the Republican. He was wearing a simple dark suit, white shirt, red tie. Nothing flashy. Nothing that would distract. The uniform of someone who'd spent years in courtrooms and classified briefings where the focus was supposed to be on the evidence, not the presentation. He carried with him that leather portfolio, aged brown leather, the kind lawyers carry to court. He set it carefully on the small table next to his chair, clasped his hands, looked at Sarah Chen with polite attention. Sarah Chen cleared her throat. "We're here tonight for a substantive discussion about policy, about the direction of our country, about the real differences between." "Before we start," AOC interrupted, leaning forward, that aggressive posture she'd learned to adopt when she wanted to control a conversation. "I just want to say that I think it's interesting that we're having this debate at all." She was pivoting to offense immediately, the way her media training had taught her. Never let them frame the conversation. Always seize the narrative. Always make it about power dynamics. "People like Kash Patel," she continued, her voice taking on that passionate quality her supporters loved, "represent everything that's wrong with America. The bootlickers for billionaires, the defenders of the 1%, the people who would rather protect corporate profits than protect working families who can't afford their rent, who can't afford their medicine, who can't afford to exist in an economy rigged against them." She was warming up now, hitting her stride, getting ready to launch into her standard speech about systemic inequality and late-stage capitalism and the billionaire class. She'd given this speech so many times she could do it on autopilot. She was expecting applause, expecting the progressive side of the audience to start cheering, expecting Sarah Chen to have to calm everyone down. Instead, Kash Patel raised his hand, not aggressively, not interrupting with words. Just raised his hand like a student who'd caught the teacher in a factual error and wanted to politely correct the record. Sarah Chen looked confused. "Mr. Patel." "Sorry," Patel said, his voice calm, measured, somehow more devastating because it wasn't angry. "Can I ask a quick question before we get into the prepared speeches about how terrible I am?" AOC blinked. This wasn't in the format they'd agreed to. "I suppose." "Great, thank you. Congresswoman, how did you get here tonight?" The question hung in the air. It seemed like such a simple question. So innocent. The audience leaned forward slightly, confused about where this was going. AOC's expression flickered, just for a second. The first hint that maybe she didn't understand the game being played. "Excuse me." "To the studio," Patel clarified, his tone conversational like they were just two people chatting. "How did you arrive? Did you take an Uber, the subway? Did someone drive you? Walk? I'm just curious about the logistics." AOC glanced at Sarah Chen, who looked equally confused. "I drove," she said finally, her tone suggesting this was a waste of time, that they should be discussing real issues, not transportation logistics. "In your Tesla, right?" Patel asked. He was already reaching for his iPad, pulling it out of the leather portfolio with the ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times in courtrooms. "The blue Model 3, the one that costs about $47,000. And there it was, the first piece clicking into place. The audience could feel it, that shift in energy, that sense that something was happening beneath the surface. AOC's expression hardened. She realized too late that this simple question about transportation wasn't simple at all. "It's electric," she said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "It's better for the environment then. It's made by Tesla Inc., Patel continued, as if she hadn't spoken, still in that conversational tone that somehow made every word hit harder. "CEO Elon Musk. You know him. You've tweeted about him 47 times in the last 2 years. Yes, I counted. I count things. It's part of my training." He tapped his iPad, And suddenly the large screen behind them, the one meant for graphics and supporting visuals, lit up with a compilation. Tweet after tweet from AOC's verified account, all about Elon Musk, all in her distinctive style. The audience could read them clearly. Oligarch, union buster, billionaire playing with humanity's future, space Karen, each tweet more scathing than the last. You've called him everything from an oligarch to a threat to democracy, Patel said, still calm, still conversational. Strong words, really strong words. 47 tweets worth of strong words. He looked up from his iPad, made eye contact with her. But you drive his car, every day. The profit from your purchase, let's say Tesla makes about $5,000 profit per Model 3 sold, went directly into his pocket. You gave money to the oligarch. You enriched the union buster. You paid the billionaire you claim is a threat to democracy. The silence in the studio was profound. You could hear the air conditioning humming. You could hear someone in the audience shift in their seat. You could hear AOC swallow. It's electric, she repeated, but her voice had lost its conviction. Climate change is an existential threat. We need to. So is the subway, Patel interrupted gently but firmly, which runs 2 blocks from your apartment in Navy Yard. You represent the Bronx and Queens, some of the best public transit in America, the subway, the bus. Bike lanes your party pushed for, protected bike lanes, express buses. You have every green transportation option available. He paused, let it sink in. But you drive a $47,000 luxury car to fight for working people. Someone in the audience laughed. It was quickly stifled, someone realizing they were on camera, but it happened. That puncture in the tension, that acknowledgement that something true had just been said. This is ridiculous, AOC said, looking at Sarah Chen with an expression that said, save me, redirect this, get him to stop. We're supposed to be talking about policy, about substantive issues, not about hypocrisy, Patel suggested. I think we are talking about substantive issues, because here's what I don't understand, Congresswoman. He leaned forward slightly and his tone shifted. Still calm, still controlled, but with an undercurrent of something sharper. You've built your entire brand on attacking billionaires, the evil 1%, the oligarchs who are destroying America. It's literally all you talk about. Billionaires this, billionaires that, billionaires are the root of all evil. He ticked off on his fingers. But you make them richer. You bought Elon Musk's car. You shop at Amazon. Yes, I've seen the packages delivered to your congressional office. There are photos, public domain, anyone can see them. You tweet from an iPhone made by Apple, a company worth over $3 trillion. You drink Starbucks. There are Instagram posts. You wear clothes from companies owned by massive corporations. His voice was rising now, not in anger, but in genuine confusion. You claim to represent working people while living like you're in the top 1%. Your base salary is $174,000 a year. That puts you in the top 10% of American earners, higher than 90% of the people you claim to represent. AOC's face was flushing now, that telltale red creeping up from her collar, visible even under the stage makeup. My salary is set by Congress, she said. I don't control. But you keep it, Patel said. All of it, while advocating for wealth redistribution, while calling for higher taxes on the rich, which by income includes you, while suggesting that people who make too much money are immoral. He sat back, spread his hands in a gesture of genuine confusion. Maybe the problem isn't billionaires, Congresswoman. Maybe it's politicians who build careers attacking success while enjoying all the benefits of it. You're not against capitalism. You're just against other people succeeding at it more than you do. The silence that followed was the kind that makes television producers check their audio levels, convinced something must be wrong with the equipment, because surely it can't actually be this quiet. Sarah Chen cleared her throat. Her hand was shaking slightly as she looked at her notes. Congresswoman, would you like to respond? AOC opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. This is a typical right-wing tactic, she finally said, her voice strained. Distraction, personal attacks, instead of discussing the real issues that matter to working families. I quoted your tweets, Patel said mildly, and cited your salary, which is public record. Which part was personal? The pause that followed felt like an eternity. AOC looked at Sarah Chen. Sarah Chen looked at her notes. The audience waited. Somewhere a camera adjusted its focus. And that was just the first 10 minutes. The producers in the control room were probably panicking or celebrating, maybe both simultaneously. This wasn't going according to the agreed format. This wasn't the polite policy disagreement they'd expected. This was blood in the water, and everyone could smell it. AOC tried to regain control the way she always did, by pivoting to her greatest hits. The moments that made her famous. The viral instances that built her brand and turned her from a bartender in the Bronx into one of the most recognized politicians in America. At least I'm not afraid to make statements about inequality, she said, her voice taking on that passionate quality again, that righteous indignation that her fans loved. While people like Kash stay silent, while they defend the status quo, while they protect the powerful, I'm willing to take risks, to stand up, to make people uncomfortable. She was referring to the Met Gala. Obviously, her team had probably coached her to bring it up, turn it from a controversy into a strength, own it, make it about courage, show that you're not ashamed, make the attack into evidence of your bravery. Patel smiled, that smile again, the one that said, "Oh honey, you really shouldn't have done that." "Oh good," he said, his voice bright, almost cheerful. "I wanted to talk about that." AOC's confidence faltered. You could see it in her eyes, that flicker of recognition, that dawning realization that maybe bringing up the Met Gala herself was exactly what he'd been hoping for. "You're talking about the Met Gala, right?" Patel continued. "September 2021, the tax the rich dress, that's what you're referencing." "Yes," AOC said, recovering her posture, straightening her spine. "I brought my message to millionaires eating $500 plates of food," Patel finished. The audience made a sound, not quite laughter, not quite a gasp, somewhere in between. That collective intake of breath that happens when someone says something true that everyone was thinking but nobody was saying. Sarah Chen tried to regain control. "Let's let the Congresswoman finish her." "No, it's fine," Patel said, waving his hand dismissively. "I'm genuinely curious. Congresswoman, tell us about the Met Gala. Tell everyone watching at home. Who was there? What was the message? What exactly were you trying to accomplish?" He was using a technique from his prosecutor days. Let the defendant talk. Let them explain. Let them dig themselves deeper with every word. The more they talk, the more they reveal. The more they try to justify, the more holes appear in their story. AOC, not recognizing the trap, took the bait. Of course she did. She was used to friendly interviewers who let her monologue, used to spaces where her explanations were treated as revelation. "The Met Gala was an opportunity," she began, warming to her theme, "to bring my message to a space that's typically exclusive to the wealthy elite, to make them uncomfortable, to force a conversation about inequality in a place that celebrates excess. That's why the dress said tax the rich." It was a statement, art as activism, using fashion to. "How much was your ticket?" Patel asked. AOC stopped mid-sentence, blinked. "What? Your ticket to the Met Gala, how much did it cost?" "I was invited," she said carefully, the first hint of caution entering her voice. "I didn't pay." "Someone paid," Patel said. He was reaching for his iPad again, and the screen behind them changed to show the Met Gala's website, cached from 2021. The pricing structure clearly visible. Individual tickets, $35,000. Tables, $270,000. He let that number hang in the air. Let it breathe. Let the audience absorb it. $35,000 for one ticket to one party. $35,000, he repeated, his voice soft, almost wondering. "That's more than half the median household income in your district, for one ticket, to one party, one night." He tapped his iPad and photos appeared on the screen. AOC at the Met Gala, posing on the red carpet, the white dress with its bold red letters proclaiming "tax the rich." She looked stunning, confident, every inch the revolutionary activist making her statement to power. "Let's talk about that night," Patel continued, his tone still conversational but with an edge now. September 13th, 2021. While you were at the Met Gala, attending this exclusive event, wearing your designer dress, making your statement, here's what was happening in your district. The screen changed. Statistics appeared, simple, damning. Average household income in the Bronx, $38,000. Poverty rate, 28%. Food insecurity, 1 in 4 households. Rent burden, 54% of residents spending more than 30% of their income on rent. Your constituents, Patel said, his voice quiet now, more powerful because of it, were choosing between rent and food, between medicine and electricity, between keeping their apartment and fixing their car, between feeding their children and buying them winter coats. He paused, let it sink in. And you were at a $35,000 per plate dinner, wearing a designer dress, telling rich people, the people eating $500 meals, to pay more taxes. Someone in the audience, impossible to tell if they were liberal or conservative, said quietly, "Damn." AOC tried to push back. "I was invited. I was given access to." "Who paid?" Patel asked. "This is a simple question. Either you paid $35,000 or your campaign paid $35,000 or someone gave you a $35,000 gift. Which is it?" The ticket was provided. By whom? Because if someone gave you a $35,000 ticket, that's a gift. Federal employees cannot accept gifts over $50 from prohibited sources. You're a federal employee. So either you broke ethics rules or you're not telling us who paid. AOC's lawyer, sitting somewhere in the front row, was probably having a heart attack. You could almost hear the frantic texting happening. "And the dress," Patel continued, moving forward before she could formulate an answer that would satisfy ethics rules. "You claimed it was borrowed, to make a statement. The designer was Aurora James, founder of Brother Velli's, high-end luxury goods, shoes that cost $500 a pair, handbags over $1,000. He pulled up Aurora James's website on the screen. Handbags, shoes, accessories, all beautiful, all expensive, all marketed to the wealthy. She got millions in free publicity from that dress," Patel said. "Her business, which sells luxury goods to wealthy clients, saw a massive spike in sales after that night. You gave her the biggest advertising campaign of her career, for free, while wearing Tax the Rich." He looked at AOC with something that might have been pity. "The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. You wore a political statement dress that made a luxury goods designer wealthy, to a party for rich people, paid for by someone you won't name, to make a statement about inequality." "I was trying to," AOC started. "You were trying to go viral," Patel said. "And you succeeded. You posted 37 times on Instagram that night, I counted. 37 carefully curated posts of you at the Met Gala, posing, looking beautiful, getting your angles right, making sure the dress was visible, making sure everyone could see you there." The screen showed a montage of her Instagram posts from that night, each one perfectly framed, perfectly lit, perfectly calculated for engagement. The dress always prominent, her face always at the right angle, the red carpet visible, the glamour undeniable. "You spent more time taking selfies that night," Patel said, his voice dropping to something quiet and cold, "than most of your constituents will spend eating this week." AOC looked like she'd been slapped, her face drained of color under the makeup. Her hands gripped the arms of her chair. Sarah Chen looked like she wanted to call security, end the debate, pull the plug. But the cameras were rolling. The audience was transfixed. This was the television event of the year unfolding in real time. "That's not fighting for working people, Congresswoman," Patel continued. "That's not activism. That's not even politics. That's building your personal brand. You're not a revolutionary. You're an influencer who happens to have a vote in Congress." The words hung in the air. The Instagram activist just got called out on Instagram activism. And they still had an hour left. Sarah Chen, trying desperately to regain control of what had become a public evisceration, looked at her notes and picked what she thought would be safer territory. Something where AOC could actually defend her position. Something where she had talking points prepared. "Let's talk about Hurricane Maria relief in Puerto Rico," she said. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, you've been vocal about the federal government's response to. Yes, AOC jumped in, grabbing the lifeline with both hands. Thank you. This is exactly what I mean about priorities. She was back in comfortable territory now. This was a story she'd told before, a story that had generated sympathy, a story that had gone viral, a story that made her look caring and righteous. My own grandmother, she said, her voice taking on that emotional quality, my abuela, was living in horrible conditions after Hurricane Maria. The roof was damaged. The ceiling was caving in. She had no help from the government, no help from FEMA, no help from anyone. Her voice cracked slightly. Perfect delivery. Years of practice. This is what happens when we don't invest in infrastructure, when we don't prioritize people over profits, when we abandon our own citizens because they live in a territory instead of a state. My abuela was living in dangerous conditions, and the government failed her. She looked near tears. It was powerful. It was moving. Several people in the audience nodded sympathetically. This was the AOC they recognized from social media. Passionate, caring, fighting for family. Kash Patel waited. He didn't interrupt, didn't cut her off. Let her finish the performance. Let her think she'd scored points. Let her relax. Then he pulled up his iPad. That is a moving story, he said. I remember when you tweeted about it. June 2021, right. Let me pull up those tweets. The screen changed. AOC's Twitter thread from June 1, 2021. Photos of a house in Puerto Rico, peeling paint, structural damage, visible deterioration, water damage, a tarp covering part of the roof. The accompanying text was emotional, blaming the Trump administration, blaming Republicans, demanding action, demanding investment, using her grandmother's suffering to make a political point. These were powerful tweets, Patel said. They went viral, millions of impressions, thousands of retweets, very emotional, very effective at making your political point. He paused, tapped his iPad. What happened next is even more interesting. AOC's eyes narrowed. She knew something was coming. She could feel it, but she didn't know what. A conservative commentator, Patel continued, Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire, saw your tweets. And you know what he did? He didn't argue with you. He didn't attack you. He didn't write a counter thread or make a response video. Patel looked up from his iPad, made eye contact with her. He started a GoFundMe to actually help your grandmother. The audience was silent now, confused about where this was going, waiting. Not to make a political point, Patel continued. Not to own the libs, not to get viral engagement, to actually fix the problem you just cried about on Twitter, to actually help your family member who you said was living in dangerous conditions. He pulled up the GoFundMe page on the screen. The goal was $50,000. The description was simple and straightforward. Funds to repair the home of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's grandmother in Puerto Rico. The amount raised, Patel said, in just 24 hours was $104,000. He let that number sit, $104,000 in one day. Conservatives, he continued, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of anger now, real anger breaking through the prosecutorial calm. The people you spend every day attacking, calling fascists and bootlickers and Nazis, raised $104,000 for your family member. To fix the exact problem you tweeted about. Real money. Not engagement. Not retweets. Actual money that could actually fix the roof you were crying about. AOC tried to interrupt. That was a political stunt. It was $104,000 in real money. Patel's voice rose for the first time, genuine anger breaking through. To fix a real problem that you had just spent 3 tweets crying about. $104,000 that could have fixed your grandmother's roof, repaired the water damage, made her home safe. He took a breath, regained his composure. And you refused it. Your family refused it. Your team issued a statement saying you didn't need right-wing charity. The audience was making sounds now. Murmurs, whispers, someone saying what? Someone else saying no way. The money was eventually refunded to donors, Patel continued. Your grandmother never got a penny, not 1 cent of that $104,000. He pulled up news articles on the screen, multiple sources, conservative outlets, liberal outlets. Even CNN covered it, all confirming the story. But the story doesn't end there, Patel said, because people got curious. Journalists, actual journalists, not your friends in the media, went to Puerto Rico. They found your grandmother's house. He pulled up recent photos. The house looked basically the same as in AOC's tweets from 2021. Still damaged, still with visible problems, still with the tarp. This is the house now, 3 years later, still damaged, still in poor condition. Your grandmother never got help, not from the government you claim failed her, not from the conservatives who tried to help. Why? He turned to look directly at her. Because you said no. Because accepting help from conservatives would have undermined your narrative. Because if the problem got solved, you couldn't tweet about it anymore. AOC's face was red now, genuinely angry. You don't know anything about my family. I know you chose viral tweets over your grandmother's roof, Patel shot back. I know that $104,000 in repairs was worth less to you than being able to blame Republicans on Twitter. I know that your grandmother could still be living in those dangerous conditions that you cried about, because fixing them was less valuable to you than your political narrative. He leaned forward and his voice dropped to something colder than anger, something more like contempt. This is what I don't understand about modern progressives. You don't want to solve problems. You want to campaign on them. You need them to stay broken so you can stay relevant. Your grandmother could have had a fixed roof. Instead, you got retweets. The silence was deafening, absolute. You could hear people breathing. How many retweets is your grandmother's suffering worth, Congresswoman? Patel asked quietly. What's the exchange rate? Because apparently it's more valuable than $104,000 in repairs from people you hate. AOC looked like she might actually cry. Not the practiced emotional display from her story, but genuine distress. The distress of being caught in something indefensible. Someone in the audience, clearly a progressive based on their Bernie Sanders pin, put their head in their hands. Sarah Chen looked at her notes like she might find an escape hatch written there. The cameras captured everything, and they still had 40 minutes left. The debate continued, but the tone had shifted irrevocably. AOC was on defense now, reactive, no longer controlling the narrative. Every attempt to pivot back to her talking points was met with another document, another fact, another piece of evidence that contradicted her carefully constructed image. Sarah Chen, recognizing that the debate had become a one-sided dismantling, decided to take a question from the audience. Maybe an ordinary person could reset the tone. Maybe someone with a genuine concern could bring things back to policy. She pointed to a man in the third row. Late 40s, Queen's accent, working-class clothes. Yes, sir, you have a question. The man stood up. Yeah, I'm from Long Island City, used to work in logistics. My question is for the Congresswoman. He looked directly at AOC. What about the Amazon jobs? AOC's face lit up. Finally something she could defend. Something where she was the hero of the story. Something where the left had celebrated her. Her signature victory. Thank you for that question, she said, sitting up straighter, energy returning to her voice. I'm proud that I stood up to corporate greed and won. Amazon wanted billions in tax breaks. $3 billion to bring jobs to Queens. That's money that could have gone to our schools, our infrastructure, our communities. She was hitting her stride now. This was familiar territory. We didn't need to bribe billionaires to come to New York. I helped stop that corporate giveaway and I'd do it again. We don't let corporations hold us hostage with promises of jobs in exchange for taxpayer money. That's not how it should work. We stand up for working people, not for Jeff Bezos. Some of the audience applauded. The progressive section, the people who still believed in her, who still thought she was fighting for them. The man who asked the question did not applaud. He sat down slowly, his face unreadable. Kash Patel pulled out a document from his leather portfolio. An actual physical document, thick, official-looking, tabbed with colored markers. Okay, he said, his tone almost cheerful in a way that should have been a warning sign to anyone paying attention. Let's talk about Amazon HQ2, Since you brought it up, since you're proud of it. He held up the document. This is the actual deal, not your tweet, not your Instagram story, not the talking points your staff gave you. The actual economic development agreement between Amazon, New York State, and New York City. The real document. He looked at her. Have you read it? AOC hesitated. I've been briefed on. Have you read it? Patel repeated. This document, the actual agreement. My staff reviewed. That's a no, Patel said flatly. You killed this deal without reading it. You celebrated killing it without understanding what you were killing. Okay, let me tell you what's in it. He flipped to a marked page. Amazon was going to bring 25,000 jobs to Long Island City. The agreement specified an average salary of $150,000 per year, not minimum wage, not gig economy, not warehouse positions. $150,000 in average salary. He did the math on his fingers. That's $3.75 billion in annual wages to your district every single year. That's direct wages to people who would have worked there, not counting the economic multiplier effect, which economists estimate at 2.5 to 3 times. So really, we're talking about $9 billion to $11 billion in annual economic impact. AOC tried to interrupt, but the tax breaks. Let's talk about the tax breaks, Patel said, and there was steel in his voice now. The $3 billion you're so proud of saving. Do you know how tax incentives actually work? Of course I. Explain how the $3 billion in tax incentives worked. AOC opened her mouth, closed it, looked at Sarah Chen, who offered no help. Patel didn't wait for an answer he knew wouldn't come. The $3 billion wasn't a check we were writing to Amazon, he said, speaking slowly, deliberately, as if explaining to a child who kept making the same mistake. It wasn't money sitting in a vault that we chose to give to Jeff Bezos instead of schools. That's not how tax incentives work. That's not how any of this works. He held up the document again. These were tax credits over 10 years, performance-based. Amazon would only get them if they actually created the jobs, paid the salaries, generated the economic activity. They were savings on taxes they would owe on income they would generate from being here. He emphasized each word. No Amazon, no income, no taxes to give credits on anyway. You could see realization spreading through the audience. People who'd believed AOC's narrative suddenly understanding they'd been lied to. Understanding that they'd been told a story that sounded good but wasn't true. You didn't save $3 billion, Patel continued, his voice rising now, passion breaking through the prosecutorial calm. There was no $3 billion to save. That money didn't exist yet. You can't save money that hasn't been generated. You prevented the state from giving incentives on taxes that would have been generated by economic activity that now isn't happening. His voice was nearly shaking with frustration now. You killed $3.75 billion in annual wages. You killed billions in economic activity. You killed 25,000 direct jobs, an estimated 67,000 indirect jobs, suppliers, services, restaurants, retail, all the small businesses that would have grown around Amazon, all the economic growth that would have lifted your entire district. AOC tried to respond. We could use that $3 billion for schools. There was no $3 billion, Patel was shouting now. The audience was dead silent. That money didn't exist. It was theoretical tax revenue on income that wasn't being generated yet. You can't spend money you don't have. This is basic economics. This is math. He took a breath, visibly calmed himself, collected his thoughts. When he spoke again, his voice was back to that dangerous quiet. Let me put it another way, he said. You claim to save $3 billion in corporate giveaways. What you actually did was cost your district $14 billion in tax revenue that would have been generated over 10 years, even after the incentives. He held up another document, Amazon's economic analysis, which I have here, which was publicly available, which anyone could have read, projected $14 billion in net new tax revenue for New York State and City over 10 years. After the incentives, net positive. $14 billion that would have gone to schools and infrastructure and all the things you claim to care about. He let that number hang there. $14 billion. You didn't save money, he said. You lost money. $14 billion. You cost your district the single largest economic development opportunity in its history because you didn't understand how tax policy works. Because you thought tax incentives were the same as writing a check. Because you were economically illiterate and politically grandstanding. The man from Long Island City who'd asked the question was nodding vigorously now. Small businesses were counting on Amazon, Patel continued. The bodega owner who would have sold lunches to 25,000 workers, the coffee shops, the dry cleaners, the gyms, the daycares, the restaurants. They'd started making plans, getting loans, hiring staff, preparing for the influx. And you killed their dreams because you wanted to feel like a hero on Twitter. He pulled up his iPad. Video began playing on the screen. Interviews with small business owners in Long Island City recorded after Amazon pulled out. You could see their faces. Devastation, anger, disbelief, despair. A diner owner, we took out a loan to expand. We were going to hire 6 more people. Now we might have to close. A dry cleaner, I told my daughter she could finally go to college. We'd have the income, now I don't know. A gym owner, we signed a lease for a bigger space. We can't get out of it, we're going to lose everything. These are your constituents, Patel said as the video played. This is what your victory looked like to them. AOC was gripping the arms of her chair. Her knuckles were white. Her face was pale under the makeup. And you want to know the ultimate irony? Patel asked. Where did Amazon go instead? Silence, waiting. Virginia, Patel said. Crystal City, which gave them a similar deal. Virginia got the 25,000 jobs. Virginia got the tax revenue. Virginia got the economic growth. Virginia got everything you turned away. And you got to feel good about yourself on Twitter. He closed his iPad, looked at her with something that might have been pity, but was probably closer to contempt. You didn't stand up to Amazon, Congresswoman. You didn't protect your constituents. You committed economic malpractice based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how tax policy works. 25,000 families who could have had 6-figure jobs don't have them because you wanted to be a hero on social media. He turned to the audience. Is anyone else here from Queens? Anyone who could have had one of those jobs or benefited from that economic activity? Hands went up 3, then 5, then a dozen, then more. Patel looked back at AOC. Tell them why your Twitter ratio was more important than their employment. AOC opened her mouth. Nothing came out, no talking points, no deflection, no pivot, nothing. The silence stretched, 10 seconds, 20, 30. Finally, Sarah Chen intervened. We need to take a brief break. But everyone knew. The damage was done, the mask was off, the emperor had no clothes. The 10-minute break felt like an eternity. AOC disappeared backstage immediately, probably to consult with her team, probably to get new talking points, probably to figure out how to salvage what was left of the debate. The audience stayed in their seats, buzzing with conversation. The energy in the room had completely shifted. Kash Patel stayed on stage. He organized his documents, checked his iPad, talked calmly with a production assistant about timing. He looked like a lawyer preparing for the next witness. Calm, methodical, unbothered. When they returned from break, AOC looked composed again. She'd touched up her makeup, probably given herself a pep talk, probably decided that she could still turn this around if she just stuck to her principles, to her core message about equity and fairness and systemic change. Sarah Chen started with what she clearly hoped would be a softball. Let's talk about your policy priorities moving forward. Congresswoman, you've been a vocal advocate for equity and systemic reform. Can you talk about? At least I'm fighting for equity, AOC interrupted, seizing the opportunity. For fairness. For a system where everyone contributes their fair share, where we redistribute wealth to those who need it, not hoard it at the top, where we recognize that the system is broken and needs fundamental change. She was trying to sound passionate again, trying to recapture her energy, trying to remember why she'd gotten into politics in the first place. Kash Patel looked at her for a long moment. Interesting, he said. Let's talk about your wealth. AOC's brain was calculating. Was this a trap? Of course it was a trap. Everything tonight had been a trap. How much do you make as a member of Congress? Patel asked. That's public record, AOC said carefully. I make the same as every other member of Congress. $174,000 per year. And that puts you in what percentile of American earners? AOC hesitated. I don't know the exact. Top 10%, Patel said. You make more than 90% of Americans. By your own definition of class warfare, by your own rhetoric about the wealthy, you're the rich. Someone in the audience laughed, quickly stifled, but it happened. Now, Patel continued, you've advocated for a 70% marginal tax rate on high earners. You've called for wealth taxes. You've said repeatedly that the rich need to pay their fair share. My question is simple. He paused. Do you pay your fair share? I pay what I owe, AOC said. That's not what I asked. The IRS allows voluntary contributions above your tax obligation. There's literally a form for it. Gift to the United States government. You can pay as much as you want. Have you ever used it? Silence. Let me rephrase, Patel said. You want to force other people to pay more in taxes. Have you ever voluntarily paid more yourself? The system needs to change for everyone, AOC said. Individual actions don't. So that's a no, Patel interrupted. You want to mandate that others pay more, but you won't voluntarily do it yourself. You want forced charity, not voluntary charity. You want the government to take other people's money, but you keep yours. He pulled up his iPad. Let's talk about how you live on $174,000 because I find it fascinating. Documents appeared on the screen. Property records, lease agreements, all public information, all perfectly legal to access. You lived with your mother in the Bronx when you ran for Congress, Patel said. Rent, zero, very frugal, very of the people. But within months of being elected, you moved to a luxury apartment building in Navy Yard, Washington, D.C. Rent, approximately $3,000 per month. He scrolled through the documents. That's $36,000 a year just on rent, in one of the most expensive buildings in D.C. Photos of the building appeared on screen. Modern, sleek, glass and steel, clearly upscale. The building has a rooftop pool, Patel continued, reading from the amenities list. A fitness center, a yoga studio, a pet spa, yes, a pet spa and views of the Capitol. This isn't a modest apartment in a working-class neighborhood. This is luxury housing. AOC tried to defend herself. I have to live in D.C. for my job. In luxury housing, Patel asked. There are affordable apartments in D.C. There are house shares. There are options that don't cost $3,000 a month, but you chose luxury because you can afford it, because you're rich. He pulled up more evidence. Her own Instagram account, which she'd made public, which she used to build her brand. Your own social media shows designer clothes, expensive restaurants, frequent travel to events where tickets cost thousands of dollars. You attend galas, fundraisers, exclusive parties. You socialize with celebrities and wealthy donors. Image after image appeared on the screen. AOC at various high-end events, always perfectly styled, always in expensive settings, always looking like exactly what she was, a member of the elite. This isn't a criticism of your lifestyle, Patel said. You earn a good salary. You should be able to enjoy it. But don't pretend you're not part of the elite while you're literally living in luxury housing and attending events that cost more than your constituents make in months. Don't attack the rich while being rich. Don't demand that others sacrifice while you sacrifice nothing. He set down the iPad. And let's talk about campaign finance. You've built your brand on getting money out of politics, on refusing corporate PAC donations, on being different from other politicians. But your campaign has accepted millions from individual wealthy donors and progressive PACs. He pulled up FEC filings. Your last quarterly filing showed $5.2 million in contributions. Average donation, $37, which sounds grassroots until you realize that's because A few thousand people gave the maximum 2,900 while millions gave nothing. He scrolled through the data. You've received money from tech millionaires, entertainment executives, trust fund progressives, all the people you claim to oppose. You just prefer their money comes individually instead of through corporate PACs. It's the same money, same source, same influence, different label. AOC was gripping her chair arms again. The color had drained from her face. "Here's what kills me," Patel said, and for the first time there was something like genuine frustration in his voice, genuine emotion beyond the prosecutorial precision. "You want to redistribute wealth, just not your wealth. You want others to pay their fair share, but you take every deduction. You want to tax the rich, but you enjoy being rich." He leaned forward. "You're not a democratic socialist. You're a democratic socialist who enjoys capitalism for yourself while promising socialism for everyone else. That's not hypocrisy. That's fraud. You're selling a product, socialism, that you yourself refuse to use." He sat back, spreading his hands. "If socialism is so great, why aren't you living it? Why do you need $174,000 when your policies would redistribute wealth to everyone? Why luxury housing when you advocate for affordable housing? Why Tesla when you could take the subway? Why designer clothes when your constituents shop at Goodwill?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable, devastating. "Lead by example, Congresswoman," Patel said quietly. "Show us how socialism works. Voluntarily redistribute your wealth. Pay that 70% tax rate you want to impose. Live on the median income of your district, $52,000. Give the rest away. Prove that your system works." His voice dropped even lower. "Or admit that socialism is for other people, that you want power to control how everyone else lives while exempting yourself from those same rules. Because that's not democratic socialism. That's just authoritarianism with better branding." AOC had no answer. What could she say? That she needed her salary, that she deserved luxury, that the rules she wanted for others shouldn't apply to her. The silence said everything. Sarah Chen, seeing they had less than 10 minutes left and sensing this might be the finale, decided to go for the signature issue. The thing AOC was most famous for, the legislation that bore her name. "Let's talk about the Green New Deal," she said. "Congresswoman, this is your signature legislation. Can you tell us?" "Finally," AOC interrupted, clearly relieved to be on familiar ground. "Yes, thank you. The Green New Deal is about saving our planet. It's about recognizing that climate change is an existential crisis that requires immediate, bold action. We can't wait. We can't compromise. We need." "How much does it cost?" Patel asked. AOC faltered. "What?" "Your Green New Deal, the legislation you introduced. How much does it cost to implement?" "Well, it's not about cost, it's about—" "Everything is about cost," Patel said firmly. "Legislation requires funding, resources, money. How much?" AOC looked at Sarah Chen, who offered no help. "The estimates vary. It depends on implementation." $93 trillion, Patel said. He held up a document, an economic analysis from the American Action Forum. "That's the middle estimate. The lowest I've found is 51 trillion. The highest is over 100 trillion. Let's use the middle, $93 trillion over 10 years. He set down the document. "The current federal budget is about $6 trillion per year. Total. Everything. Defense, Social Security, Medicare, all of it. Your plan would require us to spend an additional $9.3 trillion per year for a decade. That's more than doubling the entire federal budget every year for 10 years. AOC tried to respond. "We can be creative about how we pay for it. We can." "That's not an answer," Patel's voice rose. "That's what my teenager says when she wants something expensive and hasn't thought it through. We'll figure it out, Dad. That's not policy. That's wishful thinking." The audience was silent, riveted. "You wrote this legislation," Patel continued. "You introduced it to Congress. You've done a million interviews about it. You've built your entire brand around it. How do you pay for it?" "Modern monetary theory suggests," AOC began. "Oh, we're doing MMT now." Patel looked genuinely incredulous. The economic theory that says governments can just print money because they control the currency. The theory that's been rejected by economists across the political spectrum. That's your funding mechanism. He pulled up his iPad showing quotes from economists. Paul Krugman, Larry Summers, Janet Yellen, even liberal economists calling MMT dangerous nonsense. Even economists who agree with your politics think MMT is insane, Patel said. But that's your plan. AOC looked defensive. We can tax. Let's do the math, Patel interrupted. The total wealth of all American billionaires is about $4 trillion. Total, everything they own. If you confiscated every penny they have, literally took everything, left them with nothing, you'd get $4 trillion. Once. Your plan costs $93 trillion. You'd run out of billionaires to rob in the first 6 months. He was on a roll now. Years of frustration with progressive economics pouring out. Let's go point by point. Your Green New Deal promises to, he counted on his fingers, retrofit every building in America for energy efficiency. $6 trillion minimum. Eliminate all fossil fuel use within 10 years. Impossible, but if attempted, $15 trillion. Build high-speed rail to replace airplanes. Physically impossible for intercontinental travel, but sure, another $5 trillion. Guarantee jobs for everyone. $44 trillion according to your own estimates. Free college, $2 trillion. Universal health care, $32 trillion over 10 years. He looked at her. That's $104 trillion right there. More than the entire U.S. economy. More than the GDP of the entire world. And you want to do it in 10 years. AOC tried to speak, but Patel wasn't done. And that's before we talk about what you destroy. You want to eliminate fossil fuels. That's 10 million jobs in oil and gas. Another million in coal. 2.5 million in aviation, auto manufacturing, shipping, logistics. You're talking about restructuring the entire economy. He pulled up employment statistics. That's 13.5 million direct jobs you'd eliminate. Your plan promises to create jobs, but it starts by destroying millions. Where do those people go? What do they do? You haven't answered that. The audience was completely silent. And here's the real agenda, Patel said, pulling up a quote on the screen. Your former chief of staff, Saikat Chakrabarty, said this in 2019. The quote appeared. The interesting thing about the Green New Deal is it wasn't originally a climate thing at all. We really think of it as a how do you change the entire economy thing. Patel looked at AOC. It's not about climate. It's about control. It's about using climate fear to justify a complete government takeover of the economy. That's not environmentalism. That's authoritarianism painted green. He sat back. You wrote a bill that would bankrupt America, destroy millions of jobs, and give government control over every aspect of the economy. And when asked how to pay for it, your answer is, we'll be creative. That's not policy. That's fantasy. It's economic illiteracy wrapped in environmental virtue signaling. He looked directly at the camera. This is what happens when someone who bartended for 4 years thinks they can redesign a $25 trillion economy. No offense to bartenders. I've done service work. But knowing how to mix a drink doesn't qualify you to restructure global capitalism. The audience erupted. Applause, boos, complete chaos. Sarah Chen was trying to regain control, but it was impossible. And then came the final question. Sarah Chen, seeing they'd gone way over time but knowing this was television gold, decided to let it ride. We have time for one final question. A woman in the back stood up. Middle-aged, professional attire, Queen's accent. My question is for Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, she said. What is your actual legislative accomplishment? The audience went silent. This was it, the question. AOC straightened in her chair, ready with an answer. I've introduced 33 bills addressing climate change, healthcare, workers' rights. Bills introduced isn't accomplishments, Patel interrupted. How many passed? AOC faltered. The legislative process is complex. It takes time to build coalitions. How many of your bills have become law? Patel pressed. It takes 0, Patel said. The answer is 0. You've been in Congress for 3 years. You've introduced 33 bills. 0 have passed. zero have become law. Your legislative accomplishment is literally nothing. He pulled up the congressional record on his iPad. But let's talk about what you have accomplished. Twitter followers, 13 million. Instagram followers, 8.5 million. TikTok, 6 million. You're one of the most followed politicians in America. Very impressive for an influencer. He set down the iPad. You're not a legislator. You're an influencer with a congressional salary. The audience made a collective sound. Shock, recognition, laughter, anger, all mixed together. AOC tried to fight back. I'm building a movement. No, Patel said firmly. You're building a brand. Your brand, not a movement, not legislation, not solutions, a personal brand. He pulled up her website on the screen. AOC merchandise. T-shirts, hoodies, mugs, phone cases, all sold through your website. Tax the rich shirts for $58. The irony would be funny if it wasn't so cynical. The merchandise appeared on screen. Dozens of items, all featuring her name, her slogans, her image. You've turned Congress into content creation, Patel said. Every committee hearing is a clip for TikTok. Every floor speech is a fundraising email. Every controversy is engagement metrics. He stood up. For the first time in the debate, he stood. Let's summarize what we've established tonight, he said, his voice taking on the quality of a closing argument. You attack billionaires while enriching them. You attended a $35,000 gala in a tax-the-rich dress. You exploited your grandmother's suffering for political points and refused help when it was offered. You killed 25,000 jobs because you didn't understand basic economics. You advocate socialism while enjoying capitalism. You proposed legislation that would cost $93 trillion with no plan to pay for it. And in 3 years in Congress, you've passed 0 laws. He walked toward her chair, not threatening, just confident. So here's my question, Congresswoman. What are you actually doing? AOC opened her mouth. Nothing came out. You're not legislating, Patel continued. You're not solving problems. You're not helping your constituents. You're tweeting. You're trending. You're going viral. You're building a following. You're selling merchandise. You're creating content. He spread his hands. You're not a member of Congress. You're a social media influencer who happens to have a vote, and your constituents deserve better. The silence was absolute. America has a choice, Patel said, looking at the camera now, speaking to the millions watching. Leaders who solve problems or influencers who post about them. Politicians who understand economics or activists who understand engagement algorithms. Representatives who pass laws or celebrities who pass judgment. He turned back to AOC. You're not the future of the Democratic Party. You're a warning about what happens when we elect people based on viral moments instead of actual qualifications, when we prioritize Twitter followers over legislative competence, when we mistake performance for governance. He walked back to his chair, sat down. Your constituents elected you to represent them in Congress, to pass legislation, to improve their lives. You've given them Instagram posts and 0 laws. Is that the representation they deserve? AOC tried to respond, her voice shaky. You're attacking me because you're afraid of. I'm not afraid of you, Patel said quietly. I'm disappointed for your constituents. They deserve better than an Instagram account with a vote. The place erupted. Applause, boos, shouting, chaos. Sarah Chen was trying to regain control, but it was impossible. Patel sat calmly in his chair, his point made, his case closed. AOC sat in hers, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. The cameras captured everything. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The video hit social media at 9:47 p.m. Eastern. By 10 p.m. it was trending on X, formerly Twitter, with the hashtag #ZeroLaws. By 11 p.m. clips were everywhere. TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts. All the platforms AOC had once dominated. By midnight, conservative media was playing it on loop. Fox News, Newsmax, The Daily Wire, every right-leaning outlet had it as their top story. By 6 a.m. the next morning, even mainstream media couldn't ignore it. CNN covered it with the headline "Heated Town Hall Exchange." MSNBC tried "Context Needed," fact-checking claims about AOC. But the video didn't need context. Patel had brought receipts for every claim. Within 48 hours, the debate had been viewed 68 million times across all platforms. Instagram account with a vote became an instant meme. Merchandise appeared within days. Conservatives wearing shirts with the phrase, progressives trying to reclaim it ironically and failing. The hashtag Zero Laws trended for 3 days straight. People started applying it to other politicians. This senator has been in office for 12 years. Zero laws. It became shorthand for performative politics without substance. AOC's response was telling. She posted a defensive Twitter thread at 11:30 p.m. the night of the debate. Tonight's ambush was everything wrong with corporate media. Cherry-picked facts out of context designed to attack a woman of color standing up for working people. This is what they do when they're scared of our movement. But the problem was simple. Patel hadn't cherry-picked. He'd used her own tweets, her own words, public records, verifiable facts. You couldn't claim out of context when the full video was everywhere. Her squad tried to defend her. Ilhan Omar tweeted support. Rashida Tlaib called it a right-wing hit job. Ayanna Pressley wrote about coordinated attacks on women of color in Congress. But the response felt weak, defensive, scripted. Even some progressive commentators quietly admitted that AOC had been unprepared, that maybe she should have had better answers, that perhaps relying on viral moments instead of substantive policy was finally catching up to her. The political fallout was immediate. Within a week, 3 different Democrats announced they were considering primary challenges in her district. Polling in her district showed her approval rating dropping 18 points in 10 days. Her disapproval among independents jumped to 61%. Democratic leadership openly distanced themselves. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, when asked about the debate, gave a carefully worded statement. Every member of our caucus brings different strengths. We encourage all our members to focus on substantive policy that helps working families. Translation: you're on your own, kid. AOC lost her position on the Financial Services Committee, ostensibly due to reorganization, but everyone knew it was punishment for making the party look bad. She stopped doing live television appearances. No more CNN, no more MSNBC, even the friendly outlets. She retreated to her safe spaces, Instagram, TikTok, podcasts with hosts who wouldn't challenge her. Meanwhile, Kash Patel became an overnight conservative folk hero. His Twitter following went from 500,000 to 4.3 million in a week. Conservative organizations started recruiting him for more debates, more town halls, more appearances. His approach, calm, factual, relentless documentation, became a template. Bring receipts became the new rallying cry on the right. Other Republican officials started adopting his style. The media narrative shifted. For years, AOC had been portrayed as a rising star, the future of the Democratic Party, a force to be reckoned with. Now articles started appearing, the limits of Twitter politics. When viral moments aren't enough, can Instagram activism translate to legislative success? Even Saturday Night Live did a sketch. AOC constantly trying to pivot to talking points while Patel kept pulling out increasingly absurd props and documents. It was surprisingly even-handed, which was itself telling. The cultural impact went beyond politics. Zero laws became shorthand for any performative action without results. Someone would post about their activism on social media, and the replies would be full of zero laws. College campuses where AOC had been a hero started questioning her effectiveness. Student groups debated whether it was better to have representatives who passed legislation or representatives who raised awareness. Instagram account with a vote entered the political lexicon. Pundits used it. Journalists referenced it. It became a category. Politicians who were better at social media than governance. 3 weeks after the debate, AOC announced she wouldn't seek re-election to House leadership positions. She'd remain in Congress, but would focus on serving my constituents directly rather than leadership roles. In Washington speak, that meant, I've been sidelined and I'm trying to save face. Her media presence, once ubiquitous, diminished. She still tweeted, still posted, but the engagement was lower. The viral moments less frequent, the influence waning. The debate had exposed something fundamental. You could build a brand on social media, but you couldn't hide legislative failure forever. Eventually, someone would ask, what have you actually accomplished? And if the answer was zero laws, all the Instagram followers in the world wouldn't save you. Kash Patel had brought receipts, and receipts, it turned out, were more powerful than retweets.